This conference will now be recorded.
So if you're saying we will use Hibernate approach to create the tables, okay? If that is your wish, you can create. Just a minute, yes. ఒక్క నిమిషం. Where is it? Just a minute. Yeah. So if you want to create tables using ORM HBM to DDL option, okay? So ORM also can create it for you. You need not to create it. So if that is the case, you have to you have to start from your entity, okay? Usually, actually, we have two tasks here, right? One is front end task, front end, and back end. So we have two portions to cover here, right? Front end and back end. So usually, as I said, right, back end should back end storage should be ahead at least one or two sprints. First, we have to complete back end, then front end team can work, because front end team, if they want to test with the real data, with the mock data, they can do the testing. Even they can also start development. But for integration purpose, if they need really backend, okay, so at least the backend code need to be implemented first. So if I start backend development for any use case, consider admin use case. For admin use case, both front end and back end required. During your development, start from DAO layer. So what all classes I need to implement when I choose Spring Boot here? First, I need to create an entity class. I need to create an entity class. In our case, we need to create a manager entity with all our properties, as we decided: ID, name, email, pin code, multiple properties we have, and for which division he is a manager, what is his address, what is his phone number, all that properties. With all that properties, you need to create one entity class. You need to create a bean here, entity. You know what to use for this entity. So first you need to, step one, you should start with this. Maybe you will use some annotations like at the rate entity, at the rate table, which all annotations required. Then step two, you need to create, right? If you have multiple entities, then you need to create multiple entity classes here. Like I have one manager class, and if you have something like accounts class, if you have multiple tables. For this use case, hopefully, we have one manager, create manager or update manager use case only. So I need one table in database. So for that one specific table, one entity only I have. So you need not to create any database table script. If you want to create it from ORM, don't create any table. Don't create any table. Just to configure your properties. And we thought of using all these applications, right? Front end, mostly your back end applications. We thought of using properties from cloud config. So before entity class, you should have configured some properties to which database you want to connect. What is your database URL, username, password via your application properties file. You need to set it up. Consider this as a first step, okay? Or step two, step one or step two. Consider like a step two. Here you need to configure all your properties, DB properties, dialect properties, and port numbers. If you are using central config server, you can give config server path here. From this config server, it can inherit all the properties. If you are not using config server, put all your properties here, including driver, port numbers, dialects, everything. So many properties we can have here. Okay. For example, for our use case, simple driver properties, or you may say hibernate properties. You need to set it here. Hibernate properties you need to set up. Step two. Next, step three, for this use case, you need to write one JPA repository interface. No implementation required. Kali interface bus. Create one interface here. Step three. For every use case, this is the order. Step three, create a interface here. Which interface you need to write this classes from interfaces from JPA repository. You need to implement manager repo, okay, interface only. Manager also is a interface manager repo. Just one interface you need to add here with your entity name. Manager is my entity, and what integer. Okay, just to create an interface. That's it. Create one class, configure your connection properties, create one interface here. Which layer it is? Your repository layer. Keep at the rate repository annotation. I think this is optional. Automatically it is picking up all the repositories which are extended. You can keep repository annotation also. And this is a pure interface. Within this interface, if you want any custom queries also, you can put within this interface. When you need custom HQL queries, right? You can create them. There are again multiple approaches. Okay. Here you can put all your custom methods. Apart from, right, this repository will provide all basic necessity methods: save, update, delete, select, means get operations, find by, find operations, find by criterias, find by HQL. Lot of methods we have here: find all, find by name, find by ID, find by email, or you can write your own custom methods also. So many methods on the fly during runtime. Spring will be implemented. You need not to write any implementations here. By default, Spring will provide implementations for your repo. Okay. So just you need to create one interface. Kali interface extending from JPA repository. One interface can extend another interface. So for what we did, one simple bean class and one-time configurations. And these configurations also you don't want to care here. Maybe you can import from your cloud config server. And as a step three, create your repository. Then the next two steps are crucial for you. You need to include all your business logic here in service. You need to write one service class. If you have any business crucial operations, right, you need to write them here. Otherwise, you can simply auto wire this repo here in step three, whatever repository you have implemented. Sorry, interface, whichever you created, you put that repo here. how to put with the auto wired, auto wired, so that this object, this class implementation object, basically it is a interface, no implementation. But this interface, proxy implementation will be given. Means one implementation will be given to this interface by Spring. Something manager repo proxy will be generated with all your implementations. So this manager repo will be injected here into this interface. Anyway, assume that interface is sufficient for you. You need not to focus much. And in this service method, you can have all your methods. For our use case, what we thought, we want to manage manager users. Manage in the sense I want to create them, update them, delete them. I want to do all kind of operations on manager records. So here your service can have all such methods here. Create manager, update manager, delete manager, whatever use case methods you need. Select manager, all data if you want to see. Select managers or select a single manager. All your business crucial methods you can add here. Business methods, your business methods. So here you can have all your business methods. And these methods can call your repository methods like save, update, delete. When this wants save method, it can call save, it can call update method of repo, delete can call delete method, select can call find methods, which are by default given by JPA repository. With zero code only, mostly zero code, nothing you need to write here. And now, who should call this create manager or update manager or delete or select manager of your service class? Controller will invoke them. Controller. Basically, when I get a request from front end, this is the one who received the request first. As we thought of implementing microservices, REST controllers, we're going to implement here. REST controller. Within this REST controller, again, from front end user wants to call create manager by giving some data, update manager by passing some data from UI, and delete by giving simple ID, and select to see all the records. So for each business method, you need to have one method here in your controller also. When you want to do save operations, when you want to do save operations, here you can get the data via post method. You can have a post mapping method here. When you have update operations, you can call put mapping, put method, post, put. When you have select operations, you can use get. Okay, you can use get mapping, post mapping, put mapping, get mapping. Okay, so you can use these methods. Usually we use these three types of method: post for creating data, put for updating the existing entity, get for selecting records. So for each we have specific methods here for each type of operation, and you can have methods here. Post mapping method can call create method of your service, but to call your service need to be auto wired here, right? So obviously, repositories will be auto wired here, and the same way at the same time, services also will be auto wired into your controller. So Finally, from there, I can make calls. This can call this. For delete, right, you can have delete mapping method also. Okay, delete method. We can have HTTP delete method. I didn't mention that here, but yeah, for selects we can use get mapping. For delete, we have delete mapping method also. At the rate delete mapping. Yes, am I audible? Hello, hello.
Yes, yes, Naveen.
Definitely.
Yeah. So delete mapping to call delete methods. Delete mapping to call delete methods. So for each type of CRUD operation, we have a different HTTP method also here. Okay, and what URL I should use for my controller means just mention your admin use case, right? Like manager, right? Manager CRUD operations I am doing here. So here you can put at the rate request mapping, the common URL for all the methods. Request mapping you can put here. Request mapping you can put here. Something, something version v1 slash maybe rest manager, or simply manager sufficient. But when you want multiple versions, today I have one code, then tomorrow I want some updates with new controller operations. So you can have another controller class without deleting old class. You can have new class also. So better to maintain versionings here. So the same URL will be useful for post. From front end, right? If user call this URL with the HTTP post method, this post will be called with same URL. If user choose the put method, then put method will be called. If user choose delete, delete method. If user choose get, get method with same URL. Okay. So either it can be front end or it can be your any tool like Postman. You can choose methods. Based on methods, the same URL can invoke post, put, delete, get any method. And as a backend developer, I did from here to here. Step 1, I did this. Step 2, configuration. Step 3, repository. Step 4, service. Step 5, controller. And I want to test it immediately. I want to test my methods. I'm still at backend part only. So to test these methods, you need not front end code. I'm a backend developer. I need not to wait for front end code. I need not to wait for front end code. What I can do, you can have your unit testing, unit test cases, of course. Okay. Some other extra logics also we can have here, like logging logics, unit testing, right? This is the basic use case. So now I want to test it manually. I want to test my methods. So what you can do, you can test by using Postman tool, maybe in your local, right? You can have Postman in this Postman tool by giving JSON kind of data here, by putting your, by choosing your method post or get with your URL. You can submit data from Postman, so that this Postman temporarily you can assume that like a UI, so that you can call your post method, put method, delete method, get and all. Here the problem is when you have huge data while posting, right? Manager is having very few parameters. When I see manager, right, it is having very few parameters, right? Manager is having, just a minute. ID, name, email address, pin code, phone number, division, salary, country code. Okay, when you have few parameters, you can compose data here. But when you have parameters with array types, right? Sometimes your objects may have array types here. List of some other fields also I need here, or array of some other objects also I need here. Multiple associated objects also I have within one object. I have a products table, products entity. Within that products I have, or I have a, um, uh, yeah, products consider. If you consider products may have category entity, products may have different prices entity, sizes entity. If I have some other extra additional properties also here. Okay, having 4 5 properties composing data may simple for me during testing, but if I have hundreds of parameters that I need to compose as a JSON, I may properly not able to construct this JSON also. So instead of struggling with this postman testing, you can have Swagger UI also here. Swagger UI also here. Swagger UI for your basic testing. Swagger UI you can use here. So the Swagger UI can be generated automatically. You need not to write any code. Just if you add Swagger dependencies in your application, automatically by looking into your class, it will generate sample methods here. Sample methods it will generate. So from Swagger UI, you can call your methods for testing. Not only that, once done with your testing, right, via Postman or Swagger UI, front end people will ask you what is your request and response structure of each method, because it is a different team completely. Here if you consider one scrum team is working here, one scrum team is working here, another scrum team may work here, front end team. So for them, if they are working on front end, of course they also will have definitely idea what are all parameters you have, but what is the contract between both of them. They might assume that pin code as a number, but in your code you might use it as a string, or you might created pin code as a integer. They might assume it as a string, so they don't know the exact contract, exact inputs how to pass. So at least you are done with your testing. You may give this test data to Scrum team. If it is via Postman, they might ask you. You need to, the Scrum Master may ask the Scrum Master. So he may ask you to send this data via email. Instead of having that complete manual interventions here, if you can able to provide Swagger UI, right, your Scrum Master can give the Swagger UI URL to front end team. They can call the Swagger UI URL, and they can see what are all methods you have and which method is having which input and what is the response type. Everything they can easily understand here. Okay, so that they could able to imagine what is input for each method and what is the output for each method. Okay, so this is how we do complete backend implementation. First entity, then repository interface, service, and controller. Okay, this is how simple microservices we implement, and we test via Postman or Swagger UI. Okay, Postman or Swagger UI. Let me share this application with you. Okay, I have already code for this. Okay, I generated this code. You can see I created a manager entity. Okay, I created a manager entity with all the fields, ID, and all the fields, name, email, all the fields I have here. and I annotated with entity listener for oddity. This oddity is for basically it will take care of when you do save operation, right? Your audit listener can able to offer you this date created default, when this date created, when this date updated, all the audit parameters it can able to insert. Okay, so this will provide current date, created date, representing this the data entity containing the fields was created, last modified date. These are additional fields. Apart from that, these are my fields: country, salary, division, and all. So here is my entity. And as I said, the second thing is a repository. So you need to create the API repository here. Manager repository, extending JPA repository. Manager is my entity and the primary key data type. In manager class, the primary key is ID, taken here as long. That's it. One extra method generate exist by email ID, ignore case. This method is generated just to check already email ID is there or not, because email ID I want to maintain it as unique. If somebody try to use the same email ID, I don't want to allow them. And after that, this repository you need to auto wire it into service. So I have manager service class here. Okay, and without auto wiring also, when you have constructor type dependency injection, right, automatically this will be injected like auto wiring, or else you may remove it, put auto wired here. Okay, so your manager repository, this is constructor dependency injection. Okay, so constructor dependency injection doing here, manager repository will be injected here. Once it is injected, what all methods I have? I need to have save method. So for that I have create method here. Into this create method, I'm getting data in the form of DTO object. Then DTO to entity I am transferring the data. So I'm maintaining two different objects here, a separate DTO just to carry data from controller to service layer. When user submits data from UI or Swagger or Postman, right? This data I can keep it into DTO instead of giving this entity directly, entity structure, right? You can use DTO structure, DTO access you can give. So if you put DTO as input to your controllers, right? Directly your data will be passed into DTO. You can send that DTO to service. In service layer, you can shift data from this DTO to your entity object.
Sir, what is
So that is what
DTO?
I'm doing. A data transfer object, which is used to transfer data between layers. Okay. I
It is
don't want
some kind.
allow. Yes.
DTO is some kind of uh, software. We are creating the object.
Yeah, this is also bean only. This is also a bean. Your entity also a bean. Same like your entity, only one more duplicate copy we will create here.
Okay,
Okay.
sir.
Why? Because I don't want to give access of entity direct to the controller. If I give it to controller, what will happen? Automatically it will generate Swagger UI, and of course front end user also will access your methods, right? They should not see the exact structure of your entities. You should not give access of your entities. Okay, entity is representing your data or table. So of course you can put that here directly without details also. Directly user data can be populated into your entity itself, so that I can share the entity to service to repository, that will sit it into your database table. But I don't want give access of entity directly. because entity is having sensible information which is mapped to database. So not only that, sometimes your entities may have one to one, many to many, one to many, so many relationships. But while getting data from front end user, he didn't bother about your relationships and about your entities. Just he will pass the data whatever he need to pass. If you put your entities here, entities will unnecessarily create so many data inputs. So front end team might confuse. They need not to pass all the data. Let's say I have a manager, and this manager is having list of sellers. That list of sellers is associated here with this manager entity. Assume that if you put manager entity here in the post mapping directly, while generating the swagger, it will generate manager. Within the manager array of sellers objects, also it will generate the same swagger. If you generate to the front end, he will confuse. He will assume that okay, I need to supply manager as well as seller, but as for use case, that is not the thing that he need to pass. He need to give only manager info only. So whatever data you need from front end, keep that parameters into DTO. Front end data, whichever you are getting from front end or whichever you need from front end, create them as a properties in your DTO. DTO is a data transfer object, a kind of bean only. This bean will help you to transfer front end data via controller to your service. Okay, that is what I'm doing here. This is my DTO with same almost same properties: ID, name, email, PIN, phone, division, salary, and along with that, I'm using some validations annotations also. I'm using validation annotations also here, just to validate, just to ensure that data properly coming or not. And who pass this DTO data into this DTO means your controller. Okay, let's go to service first. So when user needs save the data from controller, it will call create method by giving DTO as a input. Your controller will pass DTO, this DTO as a input to service. Controller to service DTO input I will get. So this is my DTO, service class create method. I'm getting a DTO object here. Which data it is? Front end user data. Admin, right? Admin will pass this data. Once I get this data here, I need to shift this data to one more container. I mean, one more object. I need to shift this data from this object to another object. For that purpose, I created one separate helper method because every time I need to do this job. Separate helper method to shift DTO data into manager. If you see here, I'm taking this manager object and setting this DTO data set into manager, shifting data from one container to another container. I got parcel in the form of DTO. I'm shifting into another type, manager type, DTO to manager. I mean manager DTO to manager entity. So name getting and setting, email getting and setting, address, pin, phone, division, salary, everything. So finally, my manager object will be my manager object will be override with DTO data. Now this manager object is having latest data. That latest data I'm saving here. So data will be saved. And what I'm doing first before saving itself, I'm trying to identifying or selecting whether that sorry, that is for update case only. Okay, sorry. So here directly saving it and getting the ID which is auto generated. For ID we have used generated value, auto generated identity or auto, anything should be fine. For MySQL you can use identity, it works. Now when I return this ID, get ID, it returns a ID, whichever ID it is created, right? That ID to whom this create method usually will called by your controller. my controller post method will be called. It's okay. So here I created a REST manager resource, REST class, REST controller, common request mapping. I have taken API slash manager. Maybe if you want to put version also, you can put here API slash version one slash manager, something like that. Okay. And here also I auto void manager service. Okay. Into controller, I need to auto void service here. Now here I have post method to create the manager data. I used at the rate post mapping, create manager. Into this create manager, I'm populating data in the form of DTO. As I said, right? Front end data or your postman data or swagger data will be populated here into this DTO. So I'm calling service and service dot create method passing my DTO here. So controller create method passing DTO into service create calling your repository dot save method. But this save method I did not implemented it. If I go to my manager repository, I don't have any methods here such save or update. But for you, Spring Boot will be generated it. Okay, so controller also done. And here given response codes, API response code. I'm doing post operation once after post, which is the proper response code that I can send. 201 20 definition is HTTP, definition is created. 201, right? 403 not found for 201, which is created. 200 is okay. 200 is okay. 200 response is okay. By default, for all success operations, it used to send 200 only. For post mapping, at least I want to put 201. And for delete, it is 204. For delete, it is 204.
Sir,
Go ahead.
sir, are we not going to code this all from step by step? Like
Yeah,
I'm not understanding all this code.
you want to write line by line? We will do that. Okay. So I'm just showing you at least one time. If you see end to end, right, you will get more interest.
Okay,
Okay, na?
okay, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, line by
Yeah.
line will become more understanding for us than this one.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But it will
Hello,
take
sir.
a lot of time usually. If that is the case, what we can do, one module I'll create and one module I'll give to people. Okay, so that you can take it as a task and you guys can implement. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, you have on the top of that nearby, you have used the producers. What is the use of producers on that producer?
Produces
Producer.
and consumes. Hmm. So the response data, final response, which response you wanted to generate. Okay, via response entity. Okay, usually we will not return exact object. We will wrap around the response entity, so that response entity can hold your response messages also along with object, whether your operation is okay or not okay, or any exceptions or errors, we can put them into response entity. Still, finally my response I wanted to send as a json response I want to return it.
So
Okay.
how it is bind to our method controller application
Which one?
JSON value? How it binding to our like get mapping method using request mapping?
Yeah, request mapping is the parent annotation for all these methods. Assume that
Okay.
that request mapping is applicable for all your methods. I don't want to keep this URL every time on every method, get mapping, post mapping, put mapping.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. So this is the common method for all the This is common URL for all the methods. If somebody from front end calls localhost colon 8080 slash API slash manager by default using get method when they call, obviously it will call get method. When somebody pass this URL along with slash ID, it will recognize it need to call this get method. When you use post, by default it will call post method. When you use put, it will call put method. When you use delete HTTP, it will call delete method. Okay. Yeah.
Naveen, can you explain about at valid annotation? I think that is for the validation of the data while creating.
Yeah. This is JSR validation annotation Jakarta. Okay. So this will basically I taken DTO as a input here, right? So in this DTO I used all the annotations which I wanted to do validations. So to work with these annotations, or to you know use these annotations within your class, you need to mention at the rate valid here, so that it will invoke all that validations while passing data here. While giving data as an input to your method, it will execute all the validations whichever you mentioned in the DTO object. So each variable it will check and check. Excuse me, just a minute, please. Just a minute, guys. Yeah. So this to apply validations, not null I used here. So it will make name as mandatory field, email also, address also, pin code. I mentioned all these properties as mandatory. Okay. And yeah, salary, country code also, just a division I did not mention it, but if you mention not null, obviously it will apply validation. And here I used getter setter annotations from Lombok, so that I can avoid getters and setters also. So mostly this is
Sir,
it. And if you look into your properties, I have properties here, but if I use cloud config, if I configure these properties into my Git, I can simply remove all these properties here. Okay, go ahead. Hello. Yeah.
Hi, Navin.
Yes.
It will be better if you do like step by step coding, like maximum, if you do like 3 to 4 models, we will get like better understanding.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So now let's see this Swagger. This is my application, right? which is running in 9090. Here it is. Okay, you can see when you want test via Swagger UI. Okay, you can call slash Swagger UI slash index.html. So for your application, right, Swagger will be generated. You can see that Swagger UI here. All your HTTP methods, right, in your manager controller, whichever you have: get, put, delete, get with input, get without input, post, all the methods showing here. And if you want to save data, if you want to test your post method, so when you open it, it can show you here, it can show you here, it can show you here what is your JSON structure, what is your JSON input. So what you can do by using this try it out, you can pass your data here, whichever data you want to test. Something if I pass here, okay, so I can enter all the mandatory fields and click on execute. So once you call execute, it is showing you here response code, which response you got, 201. Okay, response body, it is giving you 1 as a response, means your ID is generated as 1. That's it. You may go to your database and verify it. Before that, let's see your console whether it did any nothing, right? No show SQL applied here. Show nothing. Yeah, just go to your schema and verify it. Go to MySQL workbench. Use admin schema. So admin schema is using select star from manager. Just we inserted, right? The data got populated here. So the date created. These fields are our fields: created date, updated date. Yesterday we created them, right? Those fields. Actually, this table is not dropped. If it dropped, these extra fields might have deleted. These fields are currently which we used. So default, the audit listener is inserting your date created and last date updated. Okay, the default system time it is picking up and saving it here so that I can see when that record has been created. Now, if you want to see that record from the Swagger UI itself, you can see. From the Swagger UI itself, you can see, as I know the ID, right? By clicking on try it, I can give ID 1, click on execute so that it is fetching my data and showing it here. The same
Just,
testing you can, yeah,
sir, the Swagger is bind with our project with any uh, dependency
yeah, Swagger Open API dependency we should add. This
in
is
form.
the inform.xml.
Because yesterday we can't find now that
Yeah,
API.
I configured new version, Spring 3 only, Spring Boot 3. Okay, 3.3 latest version. So here you can see Swagger, Open API. Okay, this is latest
Port number,
version, Spring Boot latest. Huh?
port number is compulsory. We have to define in that application property file.
Yes, otherwise by default it will pick 8080. In 8080 my Oracle is running. 8080 Oracle Apex is running. Oracle also inbuilt is having one Tomcat. NG Express Edition is having a default Tomcat. So that Tomcat is started on 8080. So I can't use this same port. So I use this. If you don't have 8080, then you can leave it. By default, the port 8080 will be used. Okay. Clear, right? Yeah. So the same testing you can perform from Postman also. What? Hmm. All my previous testing data I have here. Yeah. So let's use new request API documentation. We have great support here. Yeah. Let me take new tab. I want to check whether the record is created or not. I have all these HTTP methods I can use. Get or post, put, delete we are using, right? So I want to get a record. Okay, I want to get a record, and my application URL for get is this. Simple get. So put that get URL here. This is a path parameter. One I should give. Send. So the data is submitted to controller. Controller call your service. From service it brought your result here. I can see data here. Okay. Yeah. So other methods also you can test similar way. It's very easy to test your application from Swagger UI. Imagine if you don't have this one, recreating structure is very difficult while you are doing testing for so many entities, so many use cases. Creating this JSON itself will take a lot of time. Hello? Yeah, అయితే ఈరోజు నాకు ఇవ్వలేదు మీరు కంట్రోల్. ఇప్పుడు వద్దు అయిపోయిందిలేండి ఆల్మోస్ట్. ఇట్స్ ఫైన్ టుడే బట్ యా ఎన్ష్యూర్ దట్ డోంట్ రికార్డ్ ఫ్రమ్ టుమారో. థ్యాంక్ యూ. ఓకే. Yeah. So this is the simple way that we can test our application. And as I was saying, right, the contract between your front end and back end team, when they ask you how you implemented, what is your input, what is your output, what are all methods you have. If you don't have this documentation Swagger UI thing, you need to explain each method by giving URL. This is my input, this is my output, this is the exact input data. Okay, you need to, for your testing itself you need to prepare that, and you need to exchange the same with your UI team. Instead of that, you can give this Swagger UI, which is auto generated. You have not implemented it. Okay, this is auto generated code. So you give it, they can test your application, they can test your application with this. Then they can use similar inputs and outputs in their UI implementation. By just looking into it, they can understand what is your post method, get methods, delete methods, put methods are doing, what are their inputs, what are their outputs. They can easily imagine. Okay, yeah, we will do step by step coding. Okay, as you said, right, we will implement it one more time from back end to front end. Okay.
Yes, sir. So, what
Yeah.
is collection in post mapping? Postman.
Watermark collection, where did you see
I have
postman?
I had given an interview now. There, the interviewer asked me that, do you ever use collection in Postman like this?
Yeah, yeah, collection is nothing but, you can, um, in other words, what I can say, I have this all methods, right? I have multiple methods in my application. So for each method I have one different URL and inputs, right? Inputs and outputs. So during my testing, this is one. Okay, this is one get method I tested. And next post method, if I want to test here, I can put post and I can keep that URL and test them. Finally, I can combine all these methods, whichever I tested, and I can create it as a collection. Group of HTTP methods is a collection. Or else you create a new thing here, RBU ecom collection. Okay. So here, create all your request. Create all your request here. Get, post, put, delete, and this collection you can export and share it to. You can export and share it to another next teams. Okay. If you see here, security collection, something I created. So here I have a get, yeah, get method I have in this collection. Like this, all my testing methods I can have here. I can export this. End of the day, I can share this to front end team or testing team. That is what his question is. Maybe. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, from where did you add this Swagger dependency, sir?
My Eclipse only. In Eclipse, what
From
I did,
Eclipse.
yeah, sorry, STS only. Just right click on your application, whichever dependencies you want to add. While
Okay.
application create itself, you can add. If you feel something you missed, go to this right click Spring option, add starters. So the bunch of starters which are eligible for your application will show you here. So you pick
Okay.
whatever you want.
And Swagger, sir, which version you have used, sir? Swagger.
Hey, sorry, yes. Sorry, man. I
Swagger.
didn't added that here. No, 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 no. I didn't added that here. I added cloud configurations here. Swagger I just added from, just from Google only. Okay. Compatible version I verified and added here. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so actually I want to know the name, sir. What is the name of that Swagger you have added, sir? Swagger UI or something like that.
No, no, no. This is the one. Spring Doc Open
Okay.
API.
Okay, sir. 2.2. Okay, sir.
Yeah. This is the one. Anyway, this application I'll push it. Okay. I'll share it with you. Yeah. Any questions? Yeah. If not, okay. Tomorrow we will be doing again, right? Again and again we'll do 1 or 2 times so that we'll get hands on. Then for other microservices it will be easy. Okay. Then we can shift to front end also, and we see integrations, how to make this rest calls from front end. excuse me, and we can see service to service calls also. One or two calls I'll implement, not more than that. We will see all the variants: REST template, fin client, web client. Okay, what are all styles we have, that we will see. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Just for a front end, uh, we have to use VS,
What is that?
Visual Studio for a front end,
Oh,
or we have to
yeah, yeah. No,
make
no, Visual Studio we will use. Anything for
okay.
me, anything is comfortable. I can use VS Studio or Eclipse. I want to use simple, JavaScript jQuery functionalities. Okay, for basic CRUD operations, and I want to use Bootstrap templates. I'll show you. Okay, basic templates and jQuery. One use case, one or two use cases, we'll do it in Angular. Okay, yeah, that's it, guys, for today. Okay, so we'll see tomorrow, same time. Okay, thank you, guys.
Okay, sir.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Yeah, good night, guys.